Hello, and welcome back to the Camera Rolling Podcast. I'm your host, Ronnie, and today we're going to be talking about the Cinderella Story movies. But before we get into today's episode, I actually have a couple things that I wanted to talk about first. First off, I have an announcement that I sort of put at the end of the last episode, which is that this episode will be the last episode of Season 1. I know 5 episodes is a short season, but I want to take a quick little break before I jump into the New Year's content. And this will give me time to just make sure that I can plan out far enough ahead so you guys will have episodes every week. And the second thing is I don't have any recent watches for this week, mainly because I just haven't had the chance to sit down and watch a movie. I know, I'm so bad about sitting down to watch a new movie. I'm the kind of person who loves to rewatch my favorite shows and replay my favorite songs, so I just don't sit down to watch new movies all of the time, because sometimes it gets busy. You know how it is. But I will give a recommendation for this episode because it's more on theme. But I do think Ella Enchanted is a great little sort of, it's not quite a Cinderella story, but it's very close. Likewise, Ever After with, I think, Drew Barrymore is another great Cinderella type story, and this one takes place more in a fairy tale type of world, so that one's also a great watch, but it's on theme with today's episode, so let's get right into it. So like I said before, today's topic is the Cinderella Stories movies. If you're not familiar, the Cinderella Story movies are a set of movies that are essentially using the plot line of Cinderella and creating different scenarios around them. So the first one is A Cinderella Story starring Hilary Duff. The second one is Another Cinderella Story starring Selena Gomez. The third one is A Cinderella Story, Once Upon a Song, and that one stars Lucy Hale. The fourth one is A Cinderella Story, If the Shoe Fits, and this one stars Sophia Carson. There's 2 other ones that came after it, but I won't be talking about those today, mainly because I haven't seen them, and partially because I don't want to see them. So mainly what I want to do today is talk about each of these movies individually, but decide collectively which one is the most realistic. Because obviously, fairy tales are fairy tales for a reason. They're very unrealistic. Obviously, no one's riding away in a pumpkin, and generally magic is not real. But they specifically make movies like this that have very strong ties to real life. So I think putting them in the context of which one is the realist is a great way to kind of look at these movies and kind of compare them and see which one holds up the best. I'll also be ranking them on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the most realistic and 1 being just completely BS. So starting with A Cinderella Story, this one stars Hilary Duff, like I said. The movie was released in 2004 and directed by Mark Rosman. Hilary Duff plays Sam, a high school girl who loves baseball and wants to go to Princeton for college. And when she falls for a guy over the internet, she finds he's actually the most popular guy in school. Then she has to decide if she wants to reveal her true identity or not. So the movie starts off with Sam as a kid reading stories with her father, and this is where she gets her first idea to go to Princeton. And then while they're reading, an earthquake hits, and her father ends up passing in that earthquake. So she's left in the care of her stepmother, played by Jennifer Coolidge. Love her. And her stepsisters, who are about the same age as her. Then it cuts to her in high school, now senior year, doing all the chores in the house and working at the diner that her father left behind. She works at the diner with Regina King's character and then goes to school with her friend Carter. She also spends a lot of her time emailing and messaging a guy online. It seems he writes poetry and stories and also wants to attend Princeton. The setup of this movie actually seems pretty plausible in my opinion, especially for the time period where people were just starting to use emailing and like kind of online personas a little bit more. It just seems likely that a girl who lives a pretty comfortable life would end up with a stepmother who's just after the money, even though it's not like mansion type money. It's still quite a bit of money because they have that property of the diner. And of course, I can also imagine the emotional abuse and manipulation that's happening as well. But I can't really see a girl who looks like Sam being like kind of pretty and blonde hair, blue eyes, pretty skinny, especially in the early 2000s, being someone who gets made fun of. Even before the kids at school know she works at the diner, they still like kind of bully her, which I think is again really weird, unless like the popular girl is jealous of her. But like, what is she jealous of when like Sam pretty much is like invisible, like she doesn't even talk to anyone? Like, I feel like if anything, they would just ignore her and act like she doesn't exist instead of like confronting her. It's very much pushing that like not like other girls narrative, which I think all of these movies do, but this one in particular because it's, the time period. Like, it's still very believable to me that there would be a girl who likes sports and also wants to go to college. Like, those aren't unbelievable things to happen. Either way, Sam gets asked to the big dance by the guy she's been talking to, and this is where they're finally going to meet. And of course, her stepmother doesn't want her to go and makes her stay at the diner, but she finally gets the courage to go ahead and go to the dance. She shows up in this big Cinderella-style gown and with a mask on so no one can recognize her. And I think with the scale of the party and the amount of people there, it seems more likely that no one would recognize her, including her sisters, especially that she's wearing a mask. She, like, has her hair in curls. Like, they might recognize her stature-wise, but I think from a distance, with as many people as there were in costumes, it's very likely that they might not actually recognize her. She meets up with her dream guy, and it's revealed that it's Austin Ames, the most popular guy in school. However, he doesn't recognize Sam. He doesn't even know her. They talk for a while, but Sam is pulled away because her stepmom is going to be getting home soon. So she rushes off, and somehow they don't see her in the car chase. I don't see that being believable at all, but I do see how it might be believable that she could throw on an apron and be standing behind the counter and stuff, that they wouldn't be able to see her. So yeah, I could totally believe that. So after the dance, Austin puts up all these posters with like a silhouette of a girl trying to figure out who his Cinderella was. Obviously, Carter and Sam see them, and Carter tells Sam he'll reveal himself to the popular girl, Shelby, because they kissed at the dance and all of that, but she didn't know it was him, that he was a loser. And so he says he'll reveal himself to her if Sam reveals herself to Austin. Obviously, things don't work out with Carter and Shelby, and so Sam becomes a lot more nervous. She almost reveals herself at the diner, but he actually just walks away before she can actually tell him. Then her sisters find her emails between her and Austin. I think in that scene she gets pulled away by something, like I think the mom calls her, and so she leaves, and the sisters see the email, and so knowing this information, they try to seduce him, and he's tired of them and wants them to get out of his face, which, like, me too, they're really annoying. So they decide to tell Shelby, the popular girl, and of course she gets jealous because she was dating Austin. They were kind of dating, but also they broke up. I don't know. It was a very weird situation. So at a pep rally, they do a skit that exposes Sam to Austin and essentially explain how Sam is a loser, and Austin feels very embarrassed by this. Sam becomes a laughingstock, and Austin pretty much just ignores her. But later, she decides to confront him and tell him that she's not going to wait around anymore and she's had enough. Then, at the big football game, Austin sees her in the crowd and decides to run off the field. And before he can do that, he runs into his dad, and he pretty much said, "Dad, this is your dream, not mine," and goes to kiss Sam. I don't know why, and this is so weird to me. I think the early 2000s were just about that, like this, oh my gosh, like someone can't be two things at once, like in High School Musical, where it's like, no, you can sing and be a basketball player at the same time. Like, those two things are not, like, mutually exclusive, right? And so this idea that like he has to like quit playing football in order to like go to the college he wants and like write poetry and stuff, like you can do those two things at the same time. Like I would actually highly recommend it, that if you are good at a sport and you can get scholarships from it, you should do that. Sports get you way better scholarships at college, especially when it's expensive. So I would stick with sports, and you can major in whatever you want to. You don't have to major in sports. That's not a major, my guy. So like do that. Overall, I think the movie is fairly realistic. I gave it a 4 out of 5 for realism. I think the time period and like their class and yeah, just their location and everything make it make sense. So the second one is called Another Cinderella Story, starring Selena Gomez. This one came out in 2008 and was directed by Damon Santo-Stefano. This one was actually the one that I grew up watching, partially because I grew up on Selena Gomez, but also it came out in 2008, so I'd have been like 9 or 10 when this came out. And so this one is just like inherently my favorite one, but this is about realism, so I have to be objective. So in this one, Selena Gomez plays Mary, a high school girl who loves to dance but is weighed down by her overbearing stepmother, who's played by the beloved Jane Lynch. When she makes a connection with a pop superstar, he tries to find out who the girl behind the mask was. So the movie starts off with Mary imagining herself as a pop star dancing in her own music video until she's brought out of it by her stepmother, Dominique, who is this washed up star trying to stay relevant with these weird back knee commercials. Which, by the way, this is one of the few songs that has stuck with me for years. I will sing Baby Got Back Knee so many times, and I'm like, why? Why is this the one thing that sticks out to me? Either way, it's explained that Mary's mom was a backup dancer for Dominique and somehow died, so Dominique took her in. So at home, Mary is obviously pushed around to do all the work, like this assistant for the family, and at school she's pretty much invisible except to her friend Tammy, who loves fashion. Which, by the way, love Tammy, one of my favorite characters. So fun, and I don't know. Fashion girlies are my favorites. So when they get to school, they find out that Joey Parker, this famous pop star, has decided to attend their school, and Natalia, this popular girl at their school, actually dated him at one point. So Joey plans to host a dance contest to find his next dance partner and to just remember why he even became a pop star in the first place. It's very much about him trying to get back to his roots. Much of this movie is just kind of up in the air about whether it's actually believable. It doesn't seem like it, but also given like where they live and the amount of money they have, I can't say for sure it's impossible that this wouldn't happen, but so Mary actually attends a dance class that Joey ends up being in charge of, but she sneaks in on the other side of a two-way mirror, so she's dancing on one side where she can see them, but they can't see her on the other side. And this scene is really just to show that like Mary and Joey are very compatible and very passionate about dancing. There's even a moment where they like put their hands against the mirror and it's like they can feel each other. That was so magical for me as a kid. So later, Dominique hosts a lunch where she invites Joey, his friend Dustin, and his parents to try to convince Joey to do a duet with her. Mary obviously is like working at this lunch. She like caters it, like she's serving the food, and while she's trying to serve it, she ends up like getting bumped into and she slips and like falls and the whole plate goes up and it just like kind of attacks everyone with these shrimp, and somehow Joey ends up on top of her. This makes no sense to me. I don't understand it, but also if you've ever had like the full weight of a man smush you, no way. Anyway, the lunch ends and Joey is not about to do the duet. And of course, in this one there's a dance and Mary isn't allowed to go. She actually ends up having to clean this extremely dirty room, so like it would take her all night to finish it in the first place. So her friend Tammy decides to hire a crew to clean it while she gets to go to the dance. It's also a masquerade, so no one can really recognize anyone. It seems very plausible that no one will be able to recognize who the other person is because they speak about trying to like find people. Like they literally can't tell anyone apart. But it makes no sense to me because there's nothing crazy about what like Mary is wearing when she shows up. She's wearing a red dress. It's a black and white party, so everyone's looking at her. She's wearing this red dress and she has her hair down. She's not doing anything special with her hair or different than she's done the entire movie. And again, I feel like if I saw someone with that hairstyle and that stature, I would know that it's my stepsister. Either way, she dances with Joey and it's magical, and then she leaves, and in the rush she drops her MP3 player. So Joey tries to find the girl who dropped the MP3 player by asking about, I think, the top 3 or the top 5 songs that are listened to on it. And of course, none of the girls have an answer to it. But somehow Mary's stepsisters find out that it's her MP3 player. So to stop her from revealing herself to Joey, they blackmail her with this embarrassing video from when she was a child. So Dominique hosts a party. It's supposed to be like a birthday party for the stepdaughters. And Mary tries to tell Joey anyway. She tries to tell him before they can get to him. But her sisters play the embarrassing video, so she runs out. But Joey decides to follow her out and actually ask her out. This part was actually pretty believable in my opinion, at least from like Joey's perspective of like there's this girl and the embarrassing video is her like being like, oh my gosh, I love you, Joey Parker, like watch me dance, and it's just embarrassing. Like she's doing this weird like chicken dance looking thing. For one, it's just kind of funny and cute, but also, like, again, from Joey's perspective, it's like he already has a connection with her, so, like, that would just be, like, a cute thing to know about someone you're already interested in. I don't think that's really weird. Like, he's a pop star. It's not unbelievable that she would have had a crush on him when she was a child. But it also, and I've thought about this for a long time, it begs the question of if she was, like, a child in that video, is he a child star too? Like, did he start dancing when he was really little? Because if she was interested in Joey Parker, he can't be that much older. Like, he came back to high school, so clearly he was a kid. I don't know, it confused me a little bit. Anyway, Mary is given a bunch of chores by her stepsisters so that she can't go out on this date with Joey, but of course he shows up and he decides to help her, and they end up singing a song together. Then Mary is tricked into going to Joey's house where she sees Natalia making moves on him, and obviously this like hurts her feelings, so she runs away crying, and after this she decides to distance herself and essentially break up with Joey. But when Tammy and Dustin find out that Joey wasn't cheating or with Natalia and it was all a ruse, they try to get Mary to come to the dance competition or the dance contest to see Joey. And of course Joey is on stage and he invites her onto stage, but she's reluctant. She's still upset about this. But they do like a little dance battle and they get into it, and then he explains to Mary that like it was all a misunderstanding, so she takes him back. There's also this side plot that Mary wants to get into a performing arts school, and she applied and got in, but Dominique hid it from her. And so there's actually a representative at the contest who sees her and offers her a spot at the school. So in the end, she gets to, go to the school, leave the nightmare behind, and get the guy. This story was a 3 out of 5 in terms of believability. I think this story relies a little too much on the plot of it being this like fantasy for every girl to like meet her pop star or like celebrity that she has a crush on and that he has a crush back. But yeah, I think I didn't take off too many points for believability because again, like kind of like the location and class of these people makes it a little more believable that some of this stuff would happen, because I do believe that she would leave behind an MP3 and that this guy would look for her through these MP3 files. The third movie is called A Cinderella Story, Once Upon a Song, and this one stars Lucy Hale. It was released in 2011, and this one was also directed by Damon Santostefano. So Lucy Hale plays Katie, a teenage girl who wants to be a singer. So when the new guy at school is a son of a music exec, everyone wants his attention. And when a ruse with her stepsister gets out of hand, she has to decide if she can really tell him the truth. So this movie also starts off with an imaginary sequence of her singing in her own music video. And I have to say that this movie actually has my favorite soundtrack. Even though the second one is my favorite movie overall, this one has my favorite soundtrack. Every time I've seen this movie, I just love hearing the songs. But to end the musical sequence, she's woken up by her stepbrother. And of course, she also has to make all the meals and do all the chores at the house of her stepfamily. It seems they live in a very large house or a mansion type of house. So at school, the new guy Luke shows up and everybody knows who he is because his dad is the president of a large record label. And Katie's stepmom, Gail, is actually the headmistress at the school that they go to, so she decides to have a meeting with Luke and Luke's father at the start of the day, and Katie is kind of catering to that. While she's there, she decides to slip her demo into Luke's dad's bag. We also find out that Luke is put in charge of the upcoming showcase for talent at the school, so everyone is trying to audition for him. We get the sequence of people trying to sing to him in weird places at random times because they want to be in the showcase. And of course, later we find out that Gail wants her daughter Bev to be in this showcase. But the problem is that Bev is a terrible singer, so she will probably never get that contract. So when Katie actually gets a call from Guy, Luke's dad, about this demo, Gail decides to claim that it was Bev on the track and not Katie. Then Katie formally meets Luke when he stops by to talk to Bev about her singing, and Katie gets locked out of the house naked. I feel like everything up until this point isn't super realistic. I don't really understand how they have the money for a house that size, but they don't have money to rent a recording studio for Bev to work on music. I don't know, maybe I just don't understand how music works, but it's not like the internet didn't exist. This was 2011, so you could still post videos of you singing on the internet and people would flock to it. I mean, just look at someone like Justin Bieber, that's how he got his start. So I don't really understand how they have so much money and they can't just make their own music. Either way, Katie is forced by Gail to keep the ruse going that Bev is the one who can sing. So Katie writes a lot of her own songs, and when she hears Luke singing at school, she decides to write a song for him. They decided to do a Bollywood-themed dance for this movie, and it's definitely not great. Their blatant use of Indian culture and making a caricature out of one of the characters definitely leaves a pretty bad taste in my mouth. Either way, it keeps with the Cinderella plot in that Katie is not allowed to go to the dance because she has to watch her little stepbrother, and she's able to go with the help of the Indian character I was talking about earlier, whose name is Ravi. At the dance, she shows Luke her song, while her friend Angela does kind of this dance battle with Gail. Again, this is just very weird. I don't really know why any of that had to happen. She couldn't just distract her by being in her way or something. I don't know. It just was kind of a weird. They wanted to add that in, and I did think the dance sequence was pretty great, but it just didn't make sense. And unfortunately, Katie has to leave, and she tries to make it home in time, but she actually doesn't, and Gail catches her. This is when Gail decides to blackmail her into continuing to sing for Bev because she says she'll tank Angela's career otherwise. So the next day, Luke tries to find the girl who sang to him, and because of the way that they were dressed, he was really only able to see their eyes, so there wasn't anything for him to tell, who this girl could be. So when he overhears the same voice he heard in a recording studio, he actually sees Bev lip syncing to Katie's song. So thus he thinks that it was Bev who sang that to him. This is when he asks her to write songs and to go on a date. Except at the date, Katie is the one who's still speaking for Bev. So she ends up spending the date like texting her what she would say. Then the next day, Luke stops by to try to write songs with Bev. And of course, Katie has to step in again. And in feeding her all of these lyrics on the spot, Bev and Luke end up kissing. And this really hurts Katie's feelings. And honestly, this is one of the most unrealistic parts of this movie to me, because the fact that the little brother has all of this like technology, like spy technology, like he has these earpieces and cameras all over the house. Like, I understand that they have a lot of money, but like it is very weird and like very convenient for the plot that he would be this way. So like, I don't know. It's up in the air. So after this, at the showcase, obviously Bev is the one who's going to go on stage and sing, and as she starts to, she ends up getting sabotaged by the little brother and Ravi showing up, because they actually are more in support of Katie. And this is when they try to reveal that Katie is the one who has the real talent. This is also when Luke finds out that Katie is the real singer behind the voice. So, of course, in the end, Katie ends up with Luke. She gets a recording deal, and all of the blackmail that Gail had on her just ends up falling through. So, in terms of realism, I rated this one a 2 out of 5. There's just a lot about this movie that's just unbelievable to me. I just think the schemes are a little too advanced for what's going on. Like, I can kind of believe that Gail would have the power to tank Angela's career or to cut her off so she would, be out of the family. But in terms of like some of these other things that happen, they seem a little too ridiculous to me. And the final one that I'm talking about today is A Cinderella Story If the Shoe Fits. This one stars Sophia Carson and came out in 2016. This one was directed by Michelle Johnston. So Sophia plays Tessa, a mechanic and singer working on a production of Cinderella, when she decides to audition in disguise and has to keep up with the demands of her stepmother and stepsisters. This one I actually have the least memory of, to be honest. I know I've seen it, but I just don't really remember everything that happens. I don't know why they started doing this, and I don't know if they do this with the other two, but this one also starts with a musical sequence. So she's doing like this Grease style type of dance, but this is how we find out that she's a mechanic, because she gets snapped out of it by her stepmother honking her horn really loud. It seems they're about to go on a vacation to a hotel where the stepdaughters will be auditioning for a musical version of Cinderella, and Tessa is going to end up using her skills as a mechanic to kind of help out with this motorcycle that they want to use in the show. I don't really understand how as a teenager she is a mechanic. I don't know if she's working at her father's shop or something. I'm kind of confused, because I know I think her dad was a mechanic, but I don't know if she learned everything from him or what. I don't know. It just is kind of confusing how she's an actual mechanic. So when they get there, the first auditions immediately begin with the introduction of the male lead, which is Reed West. The director, Freddie, and Reed let everyone know that the auditions are open to everyone and that the winner of the female role will get a record deal. It's very strange that they're holding this whole production at a hotel. I've worked at a hotel before, and it's just weird that they have an auditorium. It's just very strange that they have an auditorium with a backstage and everything, because the hotel that I worked at, we had a convention center and we had ballrooms, but we didn't have anything like an auditorium. So I don't know what hotel they're at. So this one is actually more of a musical than the other ones. The other two have music in the movie, but most of them are integral to the plot. They're not necessarily like dancing for us, the audience. With this one, there's more of that kind of vibe. Like whenever they have like a dance contest or a singing contest, like it's very inherent that they would be singing and dancing, or when they practice the dancing, or you know, they're singing to each other, like it makes sense. But in this one, I think they just sing kind of randomly because at lunch Tessa and the other hotel staff decide to do like a little performance, and this is actually what convinces her to audition for the show. Obviously, her stepfamily doesn't want her to do so, so she has to do like a little Hannah Montana wig moment where she puts on this little blonde wig with some bangs and some makeup, I guess, and she like uses a fake accent to do the audition. And this in itself is the most unbelievable thing about this movie. Like, her putting on a wig, like, I wore wigs in high school, and I can tell you everybody knew who I was. Whether I wore a wig with a costume or I wore a wig with my regular outfits, people still knew it was me. Like, I get wigs can like really change how a person looks, but like Sofia Carson has a pretty recognizable face in my opinion. And so I feel like if anyone got a good enough look at her, they would be able to tell that those were the same people. Like, she has the same face. So, like, I don't understand why they can't tell who she is. And I know there are scenes where she, like, tries to, like, hide her face and position herself so they can't really see her. But still, like, either way, she almost gets caught by her family in the auditions, but they don't catch her, and she ends up leaving her dance shoe behind, thus the title. So the next day, Reed announces that he knows who's going to play Cinderella, and it will be the girl that left behind her shoe. This is when the stepmom asks Tessa to recreate these shoes so that her daughters have a chance, but Tessa somehow gets out of it when they need her help with the motorcycle. They're like fixing up this motorcycle so they can use it for the show, which is weird. I don't know why you would really need to like use a functioning motorcycle for the show. While she's fixing up the motorcycle, this is where she runs into Reed as herself, and they get to bond over like the death of their parents. In this like in the middle of their romantic moment, he gets pulled away by this girl Harper. It seems that he and Harper are together, which is really disappointing for Tessa. But later Tessa decides to accept the role of Cinderella as her new alter ego, Bella Snow. This is when she has to go back and forth to keep the secret from her family and Reed so that she can now rehearse for the show. She also learns that Harper and Reed are supposed to be engaged, so she tries to be, you know, a good person and like takes a step back and distances herself from Reed before things get too serious. But when the stepsisters overhear Tessa talking to her friend about how stressed she is trying to be two people at once, they decide that they're going to lock her in a room on the day of the premiere. But Tessa finds this air vent, so she goes through the air ducts to escape and try to make it to the performance, which I think is pretty, like, plausible. I just don't... That would be scary, in my opinion. That would actually be scary. Because you never know where you're gonna pop out at. Nor do you know if you'll be able to pop out somewhere. I don't really know how air ducts work, but it just seems like they're dangerous. So while the sisters are actually just tanking the performance, Reed confronts Freddie about these false rumors that he's spreading about his love life. This is also when Tessa overhears him and decides to show him her true self. Everyone is shocked, and Reed explains everything to her, so she'll finish the performance with him, and everything turns out great. She gets the guy, the record deal, and leaves her awful family behind. This one, I ranked a 2 out of 5 of believability. I think there's a lot about this that's believable, like this group of people auditioning for a Cinderella style musical, or that this girl would be helping them work on parts of the musical, and all this kind of stuff that people would try to like scheme to try to get ahead. I can see that. But the most unbelievable part is that they don't see through her disguise. And the fact that that's the crux of the story is what makes it so unbelievable. So if you remember the rankings as I told them to you, you'll know which one came first. It was the first one. I ranked the first movie a 4 out of 5 for believability. I think it's the most believable in terms of plotline. I could see something like this, something similar anyway, happening. I think the first one was the one that was just most grounded in reality, and it's like the more movies they make, the further it seems to get from making any logical sense. And like I mentioned before, part of the point of like taking a fairy tale and putting it in a more realistic setting is to do just so, is to make it sort of realistic. So the deviation from that makes me wonder if it's mostly just a cash grab at this point. Again, I know they made 2 more in the series that I haven't seen, but they don't look believable at all either. And one is literally a Christmas movie. So like, I don't know what that's about. I don't know why they had to make it a Christmas movie, but I think personally the reason why these last 2 got a 2 out of 5 is because the mistaken identity angle is just played out too much and it doesn't serve the plot very well. At least in the first 2, they were hiding their identity because they were at a dance where no one would recognize them. But the last 2 are literally them genuinely pretending to be different people, which is just a lot harder to pull off. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I think movies like this can be fun, and I grew up watching the first 2, so it was fun to revisit them and then also to just think about these last 2. And with that, keep watching movies, and I'll see you guys again soon in the next episode.